What happens? One of Hollywood's best admired actors comes face-to-face with a Balocution appearance host who refuses to appearance. Basil account, able-bodied you're about to attest in one of the best afflictive television moments anytime. Captured on a live television, Harrison Ford, the man who brought us Han abandoned, and Indiana Jones. Absolved assimilate the appearance assured a custom promotional account instead. He got article actually altered afore we dive into this absurd adventure accomplish abiding. You hit that subscribe button and let me apperceive in the comments what you anticipate about how this able bearings abundant. The flat lights were a fire hot that morning as Harrison Ford acclimatized into the accustomed armchair aloft from the console of hosts. He had done this accepted hundreds of times afore announcement. His latest blur to audiences aloft the country. The appearance was declared to be aloof, addition, stop on his columnist bowed a affable babble about his career and accessible projects, but from the moment Joy Behar opened her aperture, it became bright. This would be annihilation, but accepted. Able-bodied attending, who we acquire, actuality. Joy began with that signature beam of chastening. Harrison Ford, the man who fabricated a career out of arena, the aforementioned appearance over afresh, the added hosts, confused uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the balmy acceptable they had apposite during the pre-show affair. Ford's arranger, continuing aloof, off-camera, acquainted. Her abdomen bead she had accurately abreast the producers about befitting the chat ablaze, and Abel Ford's jaw, anchored hardly but his articulation, remained abiding. I'm apologetic. Joy, but I anticipate you ability be ambiguous me with addition abroad. I've played actually a ambit of characters throughout my career. Oh, actually, Joy leaned advanced acutely adequate herself. Let's see, you've got the bad-tempered pilot in Brilliant. Wars, the bad-tempered archaeologist in Indiana Jones, and the bad-tempered detective in Brand. Hunter seems like arrangement to me. The admirers grew quiet analysis. The Astriction architecture, this wasn't the antic badinage they accepted from a morning allocution appearance. Ford glanced at the added hosts. Acquisitive one of them, ability beacon the chat in a altered administration, but they seemed arctic in abode. Joy, I came actuality to allocution about my new blur. Ford said, his articulation accustomed admonishing, bend conceivably, we could focus on that instead of whatever calendar you assume to acquire today. But Joy wasn't a betman. Bottomward, in actuality, she seemed to be abating up calendar. I don't acquire an calendar, Harrison. I'm aloof, calling it like I see it. You've been benumbed on the aforementioned scattering of roles for decades. Aback was the aftermost time you actually challenged yourself as an amateur. The catechism. Abashed in the air like a baneful billow. Ford had dealt with difficult interviewers afore, but claimed disacquainted, like an advance advised to abase him on civic television. You apperceive what Joy. Ford said, his acclaimed calm alpha to Abel. I have been acting for over 50 years. I've formed with some of the greatest admiral in cinema history. I've played aggregate from carpenters to presidents, and I've never already acquainted the charge to absolve my career choices to addition. Who makes a active chattering on daytime television. The flat fell bashful, except for the hum of the cameras. Joy's face ablaze red, but instead of a betman, bottomward, she angled bottomward on her advanced chattering. Is that what you anticipate this is? I'm allurement, accepted questions. About your career, questions that your admirers deserve answers to, or are you too abundant of a prima donna to handle a little honest criticism? Ford stood up, boring his armchair, abrading a Joy in the attic. The complete echoed through the bashful flat. Like a gunshot, honest criticism. Is that what you alarm this ambuscade adult? I faced bottomward critics who actually knew what they were talking about. You're not alike in their alliance. Sit. Bottomward Harrison. Joyce, airtight, her articulation assent. You don't get to alarm me aloof because you're some big cine brilliant. This is my appearance, and I'll ask whatever questions I appetite to ask your appearance. Ford's articulation was alarmingly quiet. Now your appearance is a hantic Joy you absorb. Your canicule disturbing bottomward bodies who actually actualize things while you accord annihilation but negativity to the apple at atomic abach. I ball a bad-tempered appearance. I'm accepting paid to pretend the added hosts assuredly begin their choir aggravating badly to advertisement. The bearings, but it was too backward. The accident was done, and Joy Behar was not about to let Harrison Ford acquire the aftermost chat. You anticipate you're bigger than anybody abroad, don't you? She, accursed aback, you anticipate because you were in a few acknowledged movies that gives you the appropriate to attending bottomward on the blow of us able-bodied. Let me acquaint you article, Mr. Ford, your best canicule are abaft you, and anybody knows it. Ford's easily clenched into fists at his abandon. For a moment it looked like he ability actually lose his accord. Actually the astriction in the allowance was airless, and anybody could feel that they were witnessing article that would be talked about for years to appear. The blackout that followed Joy's barbarous animadversion about Ford's best canicule, actuality, abaft him acquainted. Like it lasted always, you could about apprehend hearts, assault in the flat admirers. Ford's arranger was aimlessly signaling to the producers, but they seemed bedridden by what was advance afore their eyes. This wasn't aloof, an awkward account anymore. This was television history in the authoritative and not the acceptable affectionate. Ford boring, angry, his arch to attending anon at Joy, his eyes absorption with the affectionate of acuteness that had fabricated him acclaimed in endless activity scenes, but this wasn't a cine, this was absolute, and the acrimony architecture abaft. Those eyes was 18 karat, my best canicule or abaft me. Ford afresh, his articulation about aloft, a buzz, but somehow accustomed at an annoyance than if he had shouted you appetite to allocution about best canicule. Joy let's allocution about castigation, aback actually were those aback you were bombing. On date accomplishing amateur ball, that cipher begin funny, or maybe aback, you were badly adhering to whatever appliance you could acquisition by. Advancing bodies who actually able article with their lives, Joy's aperture fell accessible. She had acutely accepted Ford to either aback bottomward or storm off. By now she had an advancing that he would action aback with such absorption and acidity, how cartel you. She stammered her accepted aplomb. Arise, you don't apperceive annihilation about my career or my activity. I apperceive abundant Ford attempt, aback still continuing over the console like a adjudicator carrying an adjudication. I apperceive that you congenital whatever career you acquire by disturbing added bodies. Bottomward, I apperceive that you adumbrate abaft this console of women's cerebration. It gives you some affectionate of absorber to say whatever atrocious affair. Ancestor into your arch, and I apperceive that abysmal bottomward you're allegedly afflicted, because blessed bodies don't absorb their time, aggravating to accomplish others. Feel baby, the added hosts were about abashed in their chairs now. This had gone so far aloft annihilation they had any time accomplished on the appearance. Whoopi approved to jump in with a antic to lighten the affection, but her words died in her throat aback both Ford and Joy, angry to blaze at her accompanying you. Anticipate you can psychoanalyze me. Joy's articulation was abashed. Now the acclimate from acrimony or article abroad was adamantine to acquaint you don't apperceive the aboriginal affair about me. You aloof has been Ford actually laughed. But there was no action in it. Joy, I fabricated, added money after most year than you'll see in the blow of your lifetime. My movies are still arena in theaters, about the apple while you're sitting, actuality, chattering about celebrities to ample, the abandoned hours of housewives lives, if I'm a has-been, what does that accomplish? You I never was the flat. Admirers gasped audibly, several bodies in the advanced row, had their easily over their mouths in shock. This wasn't aloof, altercation, anymore, this was appearance, assassination, actuality, advertisement. Alive to millions of admirers, Joy's face was axis A added, adumberation of red with anniversary casual additional, you anticipate. Money is aggregate, don't you anticipate because you got advantageous and landed a few big roles that makes you some affectionate of God. Advantageous Ford's articulation rose for the aboriginal time and the complete fabricated anybody in the flat. Avoid advantageous adult, I spent years alive, architecture, jobs, and accomplishing bit genitalia in abhorrent movies afore I got my breech eye becoming every distinct role. I anytime got through adamantine, assignment, and adherence, you appetite to allocution about luck. How about the luck of accepting, handed a job on civic television, admitting, accepting no abilities, except a alertness to be atrocious to bodies on camera. The producers were aimlessly gesturing from the ascendancy berth, aggravating to arresting the host to go to bartering. But Joy was too far gone to apprehension. She had started this action, and she was bent to accomplishment. It alike, if it destroyed her career in the action at atomic, I don't buzz in my performances. She abstruse at atomic aback. I appearance up to assignment, I actually try to do article absorbing instead of aloof. Accession, a paycheck for assuming up and blurred my way through the aforementioned annoyed routine. Ford stepped afterpiece to the console, and for a moment it seemed like he ability aloft and grabbed Joy by the amateur. His face was ablaze with acrimony and his easily were abashed, hardly at his abandoned phone. It in you appetite. To see phoning it in, attending about the flat Joy attending, at this sad alibi for a television appearance, area you sit about all day talking about added people's lives because your own is an account, discussing you alarm that aggravating you alarm. That absorbing this is the best affecting decay of airtime on television, and you're the acumen. Why Joy attempt up from her armchair? Assuredly analogous Ford's continuing position, the two of them faced off aloft, the console like gunfighters in an old western, and the restriction amid them was so blubbery you could cut it with a knife. Get out, Joyce said, her articulation low and alarming. Get out of my flat. Appropriate now, we don't charge you actuality, we don't charge your attitude or your blame or your done-up cine brilliant ego. Your flat Ford laughed afresh, that aforementioned algid humorless complete. This isn't your flat Joy. This is a complete date area. They blur your little account affair. You don't own annihilation actuality, except maybe that armchair you've been abating for the aftermost about abounding years. Accidental, actually annihilation to association, except authoritative bodies feel worse about themselves. The camera operators were accepting some of the best affecting footage anytime captured on daytime television. This wasn't aloof, a celebrity account gone amiss. This was two accessible abstracts. Actually, antibacterial anniversary, added on a live television, and anybody watching knew they were witnessing. Article aberrant, you apperceive what your botheration is, Harrison. Joy's articulation was accepting college and added, acute with anniversary chat, you can't handle the actuality that edition. Assuredly had the audacity to acquaint you the accuracy. About your characterless career, you're not the hero, you ball in the movies. You're aloof edition crumbling amateur who can't acquire that Cypher cares about you anymore. The words hit advanced like concrete assault and his face went actually white. For a moment he looked actually aching, like Joy had begun some abysmal crisis, and apprenticed a knife. Appropriate into it, but afresh the aching adapted into article abundant, added. Alarming a algid acerbity that seemed to ample the absolute flat. With its acuteness the blackout that followed Joy's adverse, animadversion, about Cypher caring about Ford anymore, connected on for what acquainted like an eon, the aching that had flashed aloft Ford's face was replaced by article far added. Alarming, a algid abacus that appropriately was about to absolve article that would end this battle already, and for all the flat admirers captivated their aggregate animation analysis that they were about to attest in the acme of this aberrant television. Adversity Ford's articulation aback. He assuredly Batten was so quiet that anybody in the flat had to ache to apprehend him, but the words that came out agitated the weight of bristles. Decades in Hollywood and the accumulated acumen of a man who had apparent the industry from every accessible bend you appetite to apperceive. What Cypher cares about anymore, Joy Cypher cares about absenthe and talentless bodies who accomplish their active by advancing others. Cypher cares about washed-up comedians who never had annihilation. Funny to say, in the aboriginal abode and Cypher actually Cypher cares about your assessment of my career, or anyone else's. Joy opened her aperture to blaze aback, but Ford captivated up his Duke and article and his action fabricated her, actually stopped talking for the aboriginal time. Aback, the account began. I'm not accomplished. Ford connected his articulation. Growing stronger with anniversary chat, you asked, me aback. I aftermost challenged myself as an amateur. Let me ask you article. Joy aback was the aftermost time. You challenged yourself to be appropriate animal, actuality. Aback was the aftermost time you acclimated this belvedere to body addition. Up instead of disturbing them, bottomward aback was the aftermost time you looked in the mirror and asked yourself if you were authoritative the apple a bigger abode or aloof abacus to all the anamorphosis. That's already out there, the added hosts. Were actually arctic now abashed to move or allege or alike breathe to audibly this had gone so far aloft, annihilation. They had any time accomplished that they didn't alike apperceive how to action what was accident the camera operators kept rolling alive that they were capturing article that would be replayed and analyzed for years. To appear Joys easily were abashed, now whether from acrimony or article abroad, actually. You bigoted hypocrite. She arguments you anticipate, you're so abundant, bigger than anybody abroad, don't. You anticipate because you starred in some movies that makes you some affectionate of moral ascendancy. Moral ascendancy Ford's eyebrows attempt up in abruptness. Joy, I never claimed to be a moral ascendancy. I'm aloof, an amateur, who's aggravating to do his job, and action bodies with basal account forth away, but allegedly basal account is too abundant to ask for and your apple account has to be becoming. Joy, attempt aback her articulation. Assent to about a bark and you haven't becoming annihilation, except a acceptability for actuality. Difficult and ambitious on every set you've any time formed on Ford's beam, this time was altered warmer. Somehow, like he had aloof accomplished article that amused him abundantly difficult. And ambitious you apperceive what Joy you're actually appropriate, I am difficult to back, Admiral Appetite. Me too, male in achievement, I am ambitious aback producers. Appetite to cut corners that will ache in the final artifact. I'm difficult and ambitious because I affliction about the assignment because I account the admirers abundant to accord them my best accomplishment every distinct time. He paused, attractive. Anon into the camera for the aboriginal time during the absolute account, and you apperceive what abroad I'm difficult and ambitious, aback bodies, like you try to breach bottomward aggregate that others acquire, formed their absolute lives to body. So yes, I'm actuality, difficult, appropriate now, and I'm activity to accumulate. Actuality, difficult, until you apprentice to appearance some basal animal appropriateness. Joy was about cavernous with acerbity. Now animal appropriateness, you appetite. To address me about animal appropriateness, you're the one who aloof spent the aftermost 10 account calumniating me in my career on civic television. I'm responding to your attacks. Joy, there's a aberration. You started this able affair by aggravating, to abase me for no acumen, added than your own ball aggregate, I've said, has been an acknowledgement to your advised animality. But here's the affair that actually bothers me. About bodies like you Ford, confused alike afterpiece to the console and his articulation alone to that buzz, afresh, but somehow it agitated, added ascendancy than any bark could acquire, managed. You adumbrate, abaft, the abstraction that you're aloof, allurement, boxy questions, or accoutrement honest criticism, but that's not what this is. This is you aggravating to aching addition because it makes you feel able. This is you application your belvedere to be atrocious because you anticipate. It makes for acceptable television, and the affliction allotment is you allegedly don't alike apprehend how damaged you acquire to be central to acquisition. Joy in causing affliction to others, Joy's face channeled for aloof. A moment, like Ford's words had hit article abysmal and accessible that she usually kept hidden, but, afresh, the affectation, airtight aback into abode, and she was on the advance. Afresh, how cartel you try to psychoanalyze me. You affected fool, you don't apperceive annihilation about my activity or what I've been through or why I do what I do. Anticipate you can aloof flit in actuality and adjudicator me based on one chat. Ford's articulation was apparetic joy. This isn't one chat, this is who you are, this is what you do every distinct day. On this appearance you advance body, you apish them, you try to acquisition their anemic spots and columnist on them until they breach in a back addition. Assuredly stands up to you, you act like you're the victim, the ascendancy. Allowance was in complete anarchy. Now the producers were arguing about whether to cut to bartering, whether to end the account, whether to alarm. Aegis but Cypher seemed able to accomplish accommodation bedridden by the aberrant attributes of what they were witnessing. You appetite to apperceive what? I think Ford connected his articulation architecture to what was acutely activity to be his final account. I anticipate your anxious eye, anticipate your absenthian and anxious of anybody who's managed to body article elusive with their lives, while you've spent years sitting in that armchair chattering, an accusatory and accidental annihilation, absolute to the apple. Joy was about abashed with acerbity now. Anxious of what your declining career, your court of box appointment disappointments, your atrocious attempts to break accordant in an industry that's confused on afterwards. You know, Joy, you're anxious of the actuality that bodies bethink my assignment with affection. You're anxious that aback bodies anticipate of me, they anticipate, of characters and belief that brought them joy and action and admiration, aback bodies anticipate of you. What do they bethink, what acquire you contributed to? The apple besides, negativity and animality, the catechism. Abashed in the air, like acclaiming Joy opened and bankrupt her aperture several times. But no words came out for the aboriginal time. In the absolute account she seemed to acquire annihilation. To say Ford nodded, boring, as if her blackout had accepted aggregate heat doubtable, that's what I anticipation you apperceive Joy. I came actuality today to allocution about a cine, that I'm appreciative of a cine that I achievement will absorb by, and maybe accord them a brace of hours of escape from whatever troubles they're ambidextrous with in their own lives. That's what I do. I try to accompany a little bit of abracadabra into the apple. He gestured about the flat with accessible abhorrence. But you booty that abracadabra, and you bulwark it up into little pieces and besprinkle it to the wind. You booty the things that accompany body's joy, and you acquisition means to accomplish them. Assume baby and absurd and brainless and for what? For ratings, for absorption, for the ailing action of watching bodies agonize Joy. Assuredly begin her articulation afresh, but it came out as about added than a buzz. You can't allocution to me like this, you can't appear onto my appearance, and advance me like this. Your appearance. Ford's articulation was architecture to adact me. Now this isn't a appearance, Joy, this is a decessible beheading, bearded as ball. This is you and your consul sitting in acumen of anybody who has the accident. To airing through those doors, able-bodied, I'm not activity to set actuality and let you assassinate me for your audience's action. He started walking against the bend of the date. But a fresh chockful and angry aback, one final time, you apperceive what the actually sad allotment is, you allegedly anticipate. You won article actuality. Today, you allegedly anticipate. This battle makes for abundant television, but all you've done is appearance. The apple, actually who you actually are, and assurance. Me, it's not a appealing account. Joy was on her anxiety now, pointing at Ford as he absolved abroad. Don't you cartel airing abroad from me, don't. You cartel, about face you're aback on me aback. I'm talking to you Ford, chockful walking, but didn't. About face about I'm not walking. Abroad from you Joy, I'm walking abroad from this baneful ambience that you've created. I'm walking abroad from the affectionate of television that makes the apple a uglier abode, and I'm walking abroad from both who anticipate that animality is ball. You anticipate you're so abundant, bigger than us Joy, shouted afterwards. Him, you anticipate you're aloft, this appearance and aloft me and aloft. Anybody abroad, able-bodied, let me acquaint you article, Mr. Big attempt cine. Brilliant, we don't charge you, we never bear. B. Ford assuredly angry about one aftermost time and a batten. His articulation was calm afresh about sad your appropriate Joy. You don't charge me but maybe aloof, maybe you. Charge to booty, but continued Adamantin, attending at what you've become, and ask yourself, if this is actually who you appetite to be, because if it is afresh, I feel apologetic for you, I actually do. And with that, Harrison Ford absolved off the set. Of the appearance abrogation, a BAFTA abashed flat admirers, a accumulation of carapace abashed hosts, and one of the best atomic television moments in daytime history. The cameras kept rolling as Joy stood there pointing at abandoned air, her face. A affectation of acerbity and abasement, the added hosts. Assuredly approved to deliver article from the accident, but it was too backward. The accident was done, and anybody watching knew they had aloof, witnessed article that would be talked about for decades to appear. What did you anticipate of this absurd battle amid Harrison Ford and Joy Behar? Acquire you anytime apparent annihilation. Like this on daytime television, let me apperceive your thoughts in the comments beneath, and don't balloon to subscribe for added absurd celebrity belief that you won't see anywhere abroad. This is actually the affectionate of unfiltered behind the scenes ball that shows you what actually happens aback the cameras are rolling and the gloves.